America has this problem with identity politics now. And now what they're doing is they're taking every intersectionality that people can possibly have, as the CEO of PragerU calls it, the victim bingo Olympics, and they're taking whatever demographic you are and they're connecting it to this Free Palestine movement. For example, they would say, oh, you're black? Well, because of BLM and racism that these black Palestinians are getting from these white Israelis, you need to stand with Free Palestine because BLM equals Free Palestine. Oh, you're Hispanic? Well, they're trying to build walls and borders around Gaza, and we know what that's doing to the Hispanic community, so Free Palestine. Oh, you're Native American, indigenous land, Free Palestine. I still don't understand the Queers for Palestine connection, but they make that one too.
Yeah.
And they'll make it into, actually, I did ask someone that was a part of Queers for Palestine, and they said that what's happening in Israel is an LGBT issue because it is a civil rights issue, so it inherently connects Gaza with the LGBT community of the United States. And I will pay for anyone's flight to Gaza if they are a part of Queers for Palestine and want to go see what happens to them over there. You know, if they really want to take that risk and be like chickens for KFC.
My guest today is Xaviaer DuRousseau. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Xavier, you're a PragerU personality, a self-described former Black Lives Matter activist. You cover a range of subjects in your videos and your podcast. You sort of reflect on your shift from progressive to conservative ideologies. And before we get into all that, I want to talk about what you're doing here in Jerusalem. This is your fourth trip to Israel, actually. You've made several solidarity visits to the country throughout the war, which is ironic because your first visit here was not very long before. I mean, you first came for the first time in the summer of 2023, just a mere few months before the attacks. And you faced so much backlash for your visit, just for posting, content of tourism and coming on vacation. I'm curious to hear from you. How did that experience affect your perspective on, on this conflict and this region as a whole?
Absolutely. So, well, first, the reason I'm here was JNS just had an incredible 2-day global policy or international policy summit. And I was asked and honored to be able to come here and do a panel on media narratives, just talking about how do we win over culture? How do we actually get the truth out there? And how do we discuss the different things that are happening here? Because everything comes down to messaging. So that was an incredible experience. Also doing a tour of Jerusalem and helping just promote tourism because so many people have been hesitant to come and visit Israel. But I know just from the messages that I get how many people want to come here. But it's me letting people know, like, it is safe. Yeah. You are good. Like, there's so much to see here. Even if you're not Jewish, if you're a Christian, if you're Islamic, if you are secular, like, it doesn't matter. There's something for everybody here. Yeah. So it's been an incredible experience so far. And you are totally right. The first time I came here was June in 2023. I stayed through 4th of July, which no one ever could have prepared me for how much fun 4th of July was going to be in Israel. I spent it out Shalvata.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
Oh, yes. I was outside. And I had way too much fun. And it was an incredible experience. And I, at the time, didn't know that there was as much anti-Semitism out there as what I experience as someone that isn't Jewish. So I posted just on Twitter, it's just me on vacation. I think I was riding a camel. Like, it was like in the Dead Sea. It's like as casual as it can get, nothing political about the nature of my first trip here. I came here to go on tours to enjoy myself. And I got called every name in the book.
What were some of the names that you were...
Shill, everything ends with the N-word with it. It's like shill, goyim, like for all these different words, some of which I had to look up, like just biblical insults at that point. Like, it was crazy.
So good old anti-Semitic tropes that are,
Every single one, they're like, oh, we see Israel bought and paid for you. I'm like, I just came to visit and ride a camel. So that's when I went and I asked around to a bunch of my friends, because I grew up in Central Illinois where I didn't know that many Jewish people. In fact, I had 3 in my school, 2 I didn't know were Jewish until October 7th. And I didn't know that anti-Semitism was as widespread as it was. And some people told me they didn't know either. Some Jewish people that told me that. And then others were like, oh, well, let me run down the history for you. So when that all started happening, that's when I first started making content about anti-Semitism. I do this series called Walk With Me where I have my $25 Air One smoothie and my headphones on, and I go on these just sassy rants in LA. And one of my first ones I made was about how anti-Semitism is ghetto and it comes from a source of broke and bitterness. And that was the beginning. And never would I have imagined that I would have the connection to Israel that I have now, because just a few months later, as we all know, October 7th happened. And what shocked me more than just the hatred was that within, like the hatred from Hamas, was that within 12 hours, the entire media narrative flipped on its head. Videos were being taken down, posts were being taken down, people were claiming that this didn't actually happen, it's a hoax. And I'm like, I'm talking to my friends in Israel, like this is happening right now.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized, oh, this is a spiritual warfare come to land. Like this is a biblical level of hatred and war that's about to unfold. And I knew it was in that moment, I'm like, okay, I have to step up. And that's why I started making so much content.
I have to say, your support for Israel, particularly after the October 7th massacre, has really been such a voice of moral clarity. And there's so few of you out there, specifically for us, young Israelis or young, Jews around the world. It's been so isolating of an experience. You decided to take this on as your project. You post so much about anti-Semitism and anti-Israel biased narratives on your platforms. Why are you so vocal about a conflict that really you're not connected to at the end of the day?
It comes down to a few things. It's like, one, for me, it's like, yes, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Israeli. But the more important thing is I am a human. And to me, this is a humanitarian issue. As someone with eyes, as someone with a heart, I understand the severity of how evil this whole thing is. And also, I have a very deep passion of combating propaganda, because I know how for so many years of my life, I believed in the media narratives about race and politics and all these different things. And eventually I just snapped out of it, and I've dedicated my career to fighting propaganda, especially after having visited Israel before and going to the Holocaust Museum, because my biggest question I've always had about the Holocaust that I didn't fully understand until going to the museum and seeing October 7th is that it's not just overnight you get everybody to be hateful. It is decades of propaganda and various different ways that builds up over time. And what happens is when not enough good people are willing to stand up and say something and do something, all the bad, evil people are going to take full advantage of that. And I was so determined to fight this propaganda and make sure that somebody gets the truth out there. And the sad reality is that the truth is always 7 times slower than the lie. But you know what? It's going to take a while for the truth to become the widespread narrative. But I am confident that eventually all the darkness is going to come to light.
Amen to that. Speaking of those that propaganda and that anti-Israel narrative, you also challenge these narratives that Israel's a racist apartheid state. You've highlighted the diversity that actually is here in Israel. I mean, if you think about it, Israel is 60% of Israelis are from MENA countries. What has that been for you, speaking to Israelis and discovering that really it's the complete opposite of that narrative that's spread across the world?
That's a great question. I actually would say that the very first thing I noticed about Israel that was different than my preconceived notion was that it's so diverse. I was under this impression that, and especially it's what a lot of people have now, is that Israel is white, Palestinian territory is black. Like, that's how American-centric people try to view this region as. The first thing I noticed, it's like, oh, it's actually 50 shades of brown over here. Like, I've never seen somewhere more multicultural. And I tell people, I'm like, you've been to New York, right? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, imagine that times 10. Yeah. It's like within minutes of being in Israel and walking down the streets, you hear so many different languages and you hear people of all these different cultures interacting with each other. And it was just not at all what I expected to see. And I had never been to the Middle East before. So I was like, am I going to endure racism? And it's like, no, it's like everybody's over it. And it's like, yes, are there some racist people? But where are you going to go in the world that there aren't some racist people? But is there like a systemic or widespread issue happening here? Absolutely not. And when people started attacking me saying like, oh, well, why are you standing with Israel? You know, they don't like your kind there. That's part of why I came back the second time. I was like, you know what? I'll go back. I will go back again to prove to you, one, that October 7th did happen since people were denying it, and two, that this is not a racist country. I get nothing but love and respect when I'm here. And anyone who's rude to me, they're rude to everybody. Nobody says sliha out here. Nobody. no, like
like elbows, you know?
Right. If I've learned, if anything, saying slicha when I'm in the shuk makes me lose, like people lose respect for me.
Exactly.
If anything, if I pull my shoulder into it, people kind of look at me and like, yeah, you're an Israeli now.
You're one of us now, exactly. You put the shoulder in and start haggling for the prices.
Yeah. So it's like, it's all a matter of like this false perspective that people have of Israel. Every time I come back here, I'm determined to debunk it. Like people are like, oh, they don't like Christians there. I'm like, okay, tell that to the huge Christian population here. Oh, they don't like black people here. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about the Ethiopian Christian population that's thriving here. So there's so many layers of why what they're saying is untrue. And I just love peeling that onion.
So speaking of peeling that onion, I want to talk about how you mentioned that American-centric narrative of, you know, Israelis are white, Palestinians are brown. How are the narratives that are dominating the West, specifically the rhetoric in the U.S., shaping or altering people's perspective on this conflict between Israel and Hamas?
So it's a very intentional effort. So how I describe it, and there's really a biblical element to it too, if you look at the story of Ishmael and Isaac, where you have Israel that has Israel has the truth. Israel has the great story. Israel has the right message to share. However, they're not the best at sharing it. On the other side, you have Hamas, and you have this anti-Israel narrative where it's the wrong narrative. It's evil. It's like rooted in hate, but they're very good at portraying this picture like they're the good guys. It's like they're gaslighting all of society in real time. America has this problem with identity politics now where, yes, stand with your demographic, you know, fight for your rights, all of that. I get it. But it gets to a point where it is pushed too far. And now what they're doing is they're taking every intersectionality that people can possibly have, as the CEO of PragerU calls it, the victim bingo Olympics. And they're taking whatever demographic you are and they're connecting it to this Free Palestine movement. For example, they would say, oh, you're black? Well, because of BLM and racism that these black Palestinians are getting from these white Israelis, you need to stand with Free Palestine because BLM equals Free Palestine. Oh, you're Hispanic? Well, they're trying to build walls and borders around Gaza, and we know what that's doing to the Hispanic community, so Free Palestine. Oh, you're Native American, indigenous land? Free Palestine. I still don't understand the Queers for Palestine connection, but they make that one too.
Yeah.
And they'll make it into, actually, I did ask someone that was a part of Queers for Palestine, and they said that what's happening in Israel is an LGBT issue because it is a civil rights issue. So it inherently connects Gaza with the LGBT community of the United States. And I will pay for anyone's flight to Gaza if they are a part of Queers for Palestine and want to go see what happens to them over there. You know, if they really want to take that risk and be like chickens for KFC. So it's very interesting to me to see it, and I know it happens because I've seen the signs. So, and I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but like my whole story with UCLA and the experience I have had there.
That was going to be my next question. You're right on it.
So one of the things that blew my mind is by the encampment and inside the encampment, they have these signs that
and this
break
is
down
just for
everything.
viewers that are listening. You actually infiltrated one of these pro-Palestinian protests at UCLA. Tell me what that was like for you.
So let me give you that whole rundown too. So my friend Cam Higby and I, he actually had the idea first. I was like, you're crazy. Then I thought about it. I was like, that's the right kind of crazy. When we saw that UCLA had this encampment going on for weeks where these college students were boycotting class, spending weeks living in these tents, sharing gender neutral poop buckets, by the way. Oh yes, I make sure everybody knows that. These people are not sanitary. So they had been in there like chanting Antifada, River to the Sea. They were harassing Jewish students, not letting Jewish students go to class. If they saw you with the Star of David on, they would give you hell, try to intimidate you, walking around with keffiyehs. Like, it was insane. So what we decided to do was to infiltrate, and they're not very smart. So in order to get in, all we have to do is put on a disguise. I put on a really tacky outfit, and then we went and got red wristbands from Staples. And then we went into the encampment. And I was there observing. Cam was there secretly interviewing people. And I was seeing the signs everywhere about the intersectionalities and saying all the different demographics and why you need to stand with Free Palestine, even though the correlation isn't there at all. But the thing that blows my mind the most, that I make sure everyone knows every time I talk about this, is there was a group of 5 students who went to the edge of the encampment and were pushing apart the plywood. On the other side of the plywood was a peaceful Zionist counter-protest, which all it was a big screen playing clips from October 7th. And these kids are all asking each other, they're like, what is that? Like, why do they keep playing this? Like, is this like them bragging about what they're doing to the Gazans? Like, is that what they're doing? And I went over there, I'm like, it's just clips from October 7th to see what they would say. They all looked at me baffled. They're like, what's October 7th?
Wow.
I'm not kidding. They had never heard of October 7th. They asked me what year, they asked me what it was about, and I didn't want to blow my cover, so I had to try to play it cool. But in my head, I was just like, this now all makes sense to me. You have 2 types of people inside of this encampment. You have these paid actors, which if you really look closely at the pictures, a lot of the same ones there were also at Columbia. These paid actors that are orchestrating this whole chaotic situation. And then you have these, and being blunt about it, you have these underclassmen misfits who are desperate for a sense of community, and they're desperate to feel like they're doing something good for the world. So when they hear this narrative on TikTok of, oh, racism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, you name it, they're like, okay, this is my chance to go stand with another intersectionality because I want to feel seen as a minority who doesn't fit in. Some of these kids are not evil. Some of these kids are not bad people. They're just
highly uneducated
and misguided on top of that.
Yeah.
Not only have they not learned the truth, but they have people guiding them in the wrong direction.
Since your first visit to Israel, the political sphere in the United States has changed drastically. The MAGA movement on conservative culture, Trump has been able to shift that party towards populism, cultural engagement, appealing to younger voters even minorities. Talk to me about what that's been like for you, specifically from your perspective, from becoming someone that you describe yourself as a former Black Lives Matter activist to someone who is now a self-described conservative. And what is it that Trump has been able to appeal to these different types of voters that we would have never thought necessarily would have voted for him in the past, specifically in the first term?
You know, it has been incredible. As someone who is Black and in Gen Z, I'm the first month of Gen Z. I'm 28. Yes, we're getting old.
Shut up. Literally, shut up.
Because people think that Gen Z is only like 18-year-olds. It's like, don't exclude me. Don't erase me from my generation. I am the first month. I lead the pack. So it's been incredible to witness because I'm actually a part of the RNC Youth Advisory Council. So one of my roles was giving advice to the RNC of like, here's the perspective of young people and from the perspective of a young Black person, what we want to see. And ultimately what it was is Gen Z is a very misunderstood demographic because we're so different from other generations in so many different ways. People assume the worst of us, and they also kind of hold us accountable for things that like maybe was a trend when we were in middle school. And it's very, very weird how people assume like everybody in Gen Z is dumb. Yes, there are some people that are gullible, but what generation doesn't have those people? So the thing is with Gen Z though, is we actually are a very intelligent generation, just like statistically speaking. And we really want to see new ideas. We want to see information, but most of all, we want to see at the table and to be taken seriously. And why I say all of that to preface is because the reason Trump won Gen Z is because we were so sick of the lies and being excluded from every conversation and told what it is that we're supposed to like. And it's the same thing with Black people. We're constantly being told, oh, you need to care about racism in this social issue and this social issue. It's like, no, how about the fact that my generation can't afford to buy homes? How about the fact that my generation is having to bear the burden of every generation before us? How about the fact that crime is so widespread in all of our communities? We want it to be heard out. rather than just be told, hey, Gen Z, Meg the Stallion is twerking on stage. So how about you vote for Democrats because we have this girl that you guys like twerking. And then meanwhile, Trump is telling us, here are policies that's going to make things more affordable for you. Here's how I'm going to make the country safer for you. And I want to hear what else is it that you want, because I'm going to make sure that's handled too. And seeing Trump take this stance of urgency, and like the second he gets in the office, he starts signing executive orders. This is what we want. We are the era of efficiency and effectivity. We want to see business getting handled. And that's what President Trump has been doing since day one. And
so to that point, you've described your shift from a liberal activist to conservative commentator as sort of an accidental red pilling, sparked by these PragerU videos. Tell me more about that and that whole experience.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very liberal, left-leaning household. I would describe a lot of my family as full-blown Marxist. Like, it's scary sometimes the things that I'll see them post online. And I was never radical, but I was very progressive in a lot of ways, very liberal in a lot of ways. And in some ways, I would describe myself now as classically liberal. Like, I'm all for people having their rights and everything. But I was very liberal in the sense that, like, almost like a democratic socialist type of way.
Yeah.
Like very pro Bernie and all of that. So how it ended up happening was I just as a pastime, like I was very passionate online about activism, talking about racial issues, all of that, from high school, in college, and as well as just like my early 20s or throughout my mid 20s. And in 2020, I was literally bored during the pandemic. I had nothing to do. And my roommate's girlfriend at the time, my roommate at the time, his girlfriend, they're still together. Let me clarify that before I get cursed out.
Drama.
Right, let me not start any drama. So my ex-roommate's girlfriend and we would watch this show on Netflix all the time together. And she told me, she goes, and basically like you get to play these different characters on the show. It's a whole thing. And she was like, you should apply. And I applied literally as a joke to make my friends laugh. And I posted it on my Finsta, my application. Never would I have imagined that out of 25,000 people, I would be amongst those selected. And I was like, this is insane. So I got the first call back around May. And then by June, I was already starting to progress towards the finals. And around that same time, George Floyd died. And they're like, well, you're very passionate about activism. You're very this, that, and the other. Why don't we make your whole character centered around that? And I was like, I couldn't imagine anything better. Yeah. So, and then since it was the pandemic, the filming actually kept getting pushed out more and more because they were trying to figure things out. And that gave me all this time where I was like, you know what? If I'm going to go on here having these nuanced debating conversations, I need to become as masterful at this debate as I possibly can be. And I decided, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start studying the counter arguments. In fact, I'm going to prepare a whole series debunking PragerU videos as a way of preparing myself to go on this show. And PragerU is an educational nonprofit. They make political content. They talk largely about American and Judeo-Christian values. And I set out to make this whole series debunking them. And it was like one by one, all these different things that I so passionately believed in, I realized had a foundation of lies. I realized that so many of these things that I thought I was doing good in the world by spreading had no substance to it.
Like what?
Like, for example, BLM was the biggest thing. Like, people always say, what was the final straw for me? It was learning that not only are the statistics that BLM uses to try to make it seem like black people are being hunted down completely false. Like, as an unarmed black man in America, I have a better chance of being struck by lightning than being shot and killed by a police officer, like, as an objective fact.
But do you think that maybe, and I'll quote some of the things that you've said, you have, some would say that you have a little bit of a controversial perspective on systemic racism. You've said, I quote, being black is actually so convenient in America. Do you think it's possible, though, that you're just one of the lucky ones?
No, because I definitely don't come from privilege. And a lot of people, they assume things about my background, that like I come from privilege because of the way I sound or whatever. It's like, little do people know, I am from literally the roughest neighborhood in Chicago. My parents fled the hood like refugees and went to the middle of nowhere cornfields to try to give me a better life. And I took advantage of that. In that sense, I could say I'm lucky. But the thing is nothing about my situation made it easier for me to get out of that situation. And look, here's the thing, the reality that I have to make clear to people. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. Like I said earlier, there are always going to be racist people. And unfortunately, sometimes there's people in a position of power who happen to be racist. But when it comes to a systemic issue, inherently that's not true in America. First of all, our Constitution completely outlaws racial discrimination, but it doesn't apply towards white people. But that's a whole different conversation. But when it comes to discriminating on someone because of being a minority, that is completely outlawed in the Constitution. So no, it's not systemic racism. But then even just societally and culturally, if I went up to anyone and said that this person over here just called me the N-word with the hard R, 99% of people in America are going to be disgusted by that. If America were a racist country, then no one would care. If anything, people would support it. But because socially, America has shifted so far from the way it used to be, no, America is not a racist country. And the reason I say things that are, it's like tongue in cheek when I'm like, I always say it's very easy life being black in America these days. It is because, and truly, it's factual. When it comes to academia, for example, if you are black, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. I want to say, and don't quote me on the exact number, I want to say if you are black, you can get, it's like on the SAT, I'll just put it this way because I can't remember the exact numbers, but on the SAT scores to get into college, the bar for a black person is so much lower that you have to get over to get into the same school, the same program as someone who's white and especially someone who's Asian. I want to say it's a 540-point difference between if you're Asian and if you're black to get into the same school, what the requirement is for you.
So basically you're saying that the whole concept of affirmative action is no longer relevant.
It shouldn't be relevant anymore, but it is. The fact that we still have DEI and affirmative action and all of these things is toxic in America because black people have come so far. When it first started happening, yeah, I get it. I support it back then. But we have come so far from that era. There are over 2 million black millionaires in America today, a lot of which are self-made. Black women are outpacing in so many different metrics when it comes to education and education rates that it's like, how can you sit here and say that we don't have the tools and the resources to be successful when so many black people are out here thriving in America? I came from, I don't want to say poor, but I would say very broke family. And I've worked very hard. I never had a B. I was valedictorian. I got a full ride to college. And now I have a great career. I live a beautiful life because I worked for that. I earned my privilege. Black and white, that's not where the privilege comes from. The privilege comes from green. It comes from money. Socioeconomic privilege, I think a lot of people equate that with racial privilege, and that's just not the case. So factually speaking, systemic racism does not exist in America anymore. Circumstantial racism might exist. We've all dealt with racism, but it's not a systemic issue anymore. And learning those type of things really shifted my mindset, and it made me take a step back and realize all these other facets of how the Democratic Party for so long, they were banking on the fear of racism to maintain the black vote. Racism and fear are the Achilles heel of black Americans, and I was no longer willing to succumb to that anymore. I would much rather be on the Republican side where they view me as an American who wants my economy and my country to get itself together. I don't want to be viewed on the left as someone who needs to be protected. It's like, no, I need to be protected from you. I need to be protected from the government. So backing out of the show, that reality show, was the greatest decision I possibly could have made, and it was scary. I paused my entire life to go and be on that show, but I walked away from it because I wasn't going to do that character anymore. And a few months later, I started making content about my new perspective. And I think there's a reason why I have so many black people who follow me now, because I'm far from the only one who feels this way. Especially as a black man, and a young black man at that. Black men are more and more beginning to support President Trump because Trump is the real deal. Trump is real. We want someone who's going to be genuine and authentic. Does he say some ignorant things sometimes? Yeah, but I would rather know how you really feel rather than butter me up and then talk badly about me behind the scenes.
So speaking of these minorities that are slowly starting to turn to the conservative party and support Trump, some of them include Candace Owens, who has become very controversial. You on your platform call out the woke left, but there is a rise in what we call the woke right, which not a lot of people know about. I'm curious to hear from you, your perspective on that, and your thoughts on someone like Candace Owens, who also holds very anti-Semitic views.
I wish this was tea because I had to sip it.
I can get you alcohol if you prefer.
Okay, you're on my type of time. Hey, I'm on vacation. So, yeah, the woke right has been something I've been very vocal about lately. The woke right is really just this. I'm going to be blunt. I feel like people have lost their damn minds. Yeah. Okay. A lot of people have lost their minds on the right. And it's because so many people are so triggered on the right because of how far the left went that now they're playing the exact same game. And every time I call out the woke right, they'll say things to me like, oh, but if it were the other way around, or oh, the left would have done this. It's like, my question for you is, why are you stooping to the level of the side that's losing? Why are you using a losing playbook? Why are you being the same hateful, cancel culture, illogical, unresearched, ignorant, and loud voice?
Ignorant, racist, anti-Semitic.
All these different things. And what's extremely frustrating for me as someone who is a minority, who has fought tooth and nail to bring this credibility to the right of, hey, the right is not the side of racism and fascism that you guys claim that they are. It's like, now you guys are starting to act like racist and fascist. And there's a huge divide on the right now where you have this side of the right, they're like this, it's a very much a horseshoe, and the further right you go, it mirrors more and more the far left, and they both have unhinged radical sides that I try my best nowadays to not hold the entire left accountable for the far left in the same way that I want that grace put on the right, because even on the right there is so much division now of the fringe and the sane. And it's so funny to me because people are so shocked when I say this. I get more hate from the far right than I get from the entire left.
Even though you're part of the conservative party, you're a representative of the Republican youth. Remind me again what
the RNC Youth Advisory Council.
Right.
I have brought so many people over to the right, and still the fringe right hates on me so much. But it's ironic because the fringe right also is going against. The fringe right is also going against Trump, which kind of makes sense because what shocks a lot of people is that Nazism is actually a far left tendency. Like from America's scale, it's far left, not far right. But the people on the far right have gone so far that they're starting to give Nazi teas, if we're being so honest about it. Like it's starting to really sound a little Hitlery, and like a lot of like it's getting out of control. And this widespread anti-Semitism, this desire that people have to put all of their blame on one demographic, that is something out of the playbook of the far left that is baffling to me to see on the far right. But what makes me have a lot of hope is that what people have to understand is the radical side of any political spectrum is going to always be the loudest, but that does not mean they're the most popular. So if you go on X, because other apps it doesn't happen as much.
Exactly. That's my question. I mean, how do you explain the fact that we're seeing people like Tucker Carlson, like Candace Owens, and they've got millions of followers on X? It's insane.
Well, their millions of followers come from before they started being, on that side of the aisle. Okay, so they were already very established before they started to come off as more unhinged in some of their views. But what I will say is like a lot of these rising stars, particularly, like a lot of them you can call out pretty easily. There's a lot of rising stars that are truly, truly the fringe right who their entire audience, they live in basements. They live in basements and they do not go outside. And I don't mean like literally, I mean, yes, they literally live in basements too, but like they're just friends. Like they don't go outside. They're not social. They have no social skills. They're the people that when you see them on the sidewalk, you cross the street.
Yeah, they're keyboard warriors.
They're keyboard warriors with no lives and nothing going for them. They're miserable, broke, and bitter. Okay. When you meet majority of people that are on the right, they're a lot more sane. And that's why, like, I live in LA and I tell people all the time, even though LA is as blue as it can get on paper, I get so much love in LA. And my friend Emily Wilson, Emily Saves America, we talk about this all the time. When I meet my supporters in public, anywhere I go, they're usually attractive, successful, they're intelligent. We sit and we like chat for a while. Sometimes I'll grab a coffee with them. It's like my audience of people who are right of center, like I am, they're saying they're cool, they get it, they're smart, they're researched. When I interact with people on the fringe right, they're as opposite from my target audience as they possibly can be. So there is always going to be division even within a certain sector of the aisle. Now, what has caused certain people to become as anti-Israel as they are, I think that some people get so caught up in conspiracies that it goes too far. Because don't get me wrong, I love a good conspiracy.
Who doesn't?
Because so many of them come true, and I will entertain almost anything at this point.
So specifically about conspiracies, do you think that that comes from COVID and how in 2020, specifically in the Conservative Party, there was all these conspiracy theories of really, COVID didn't really happen. It was all just planned and they just want to get all of our information. Is that where it's stemming from?
Where is it stemming from? I think it's stemming from the fact that we've been lied to so much by our own government. I do say that I can only blame people for being a wild conspiracy theorist to a certain extent, because again, I'm at the point I'll hear out any conspiracy because of how many things we were blatantly lied to far before COVID. I mean, we're just finally getting answers of like, oh yeah, the CIA did totally kill JFK.
Yeah.
Like they're finally admitting that as if we didn't already know. But in the 80s, if you would have brought that up, people would have said that you're insane. But I think for some people, a conspiracy gives them comfortability, because what I always say, whether it's anti-Semitism, racism, any type of prejudice, it's laziness. It's really rooted in laziness. It's because the human brain, people who are lazy especially, they like to compartmentalize people. And instead of getting to know people as individuals or getting to know people based on the realities, it's easier for their brain to just make a mass assumption about everybody involved in a demographic. So the reason that it's easier for people to just blame everything on the Jews is because it takes accountability away from all these different individuals, all these different demographics, all these different parties involved. It's like, are there some bad Jewish people out there? Of course. There's bad Catholics, there's bad Muslims. Well, you're not allowed to say that these days. There's bad people of every demographic that are out there, every race, every creed. You are going to find bad people. But to sit there and try to blame all of your problems on a random group that you've decided that they're the people to point the finger at, it's like, come on. You're lazy, you're ignorant, and you're really just sad.
Xavier, you're certainly not somebody that can be compartmentalized. And I got to say, really, I mean, as we say in Hebrew, kol hakavod, for all the crazy hard work that you're doing, taking on anti-Semites, taking on false narratives and propaganda on the internet. I don't know how you don't need a drink every single day. Thank you so much for coming on to another episode of East to West, and I can't wait for you to come back.
Thank you so much for having me. Now I need a drink.
That was vodka the entire time.